China's building human-like robots? Here's why. China's heading for doom. Its labor force is rapidly shrinking and its aging population is estimated to hit 400 million by 2030, meaning there's a pending labor shortage. Thus, the cost of labor will hike viciously. In attempts to address these current pressing concerns, China is currently in a race to build as many humanoid robots as possible. Yup, robots in human form to take care of their aged, service their industries, and provide a boost for the People's Liberation Army. But how did China, the most populous nation in the world, get here? Well, this has been their own doing. The Chinese government's grand plan of using the one-child policy to control population has backfired catastrophically. In the late 70s and early 80s, the Chinese government instituted the one-child policy to control high birth rates and the alarming population growth rate in the country. It was a gruesome scheme that restricted family units to producing only one child. Yep. No ifs and buts, you just had to comply. This is how it was enforced. Officials tracked down pregnant women who already had children and assaulted them to get them to terminate their pregnancies. Fathers, on the other hand, were thrown into jail for a minimum 7 years for getting their wives pregnant. Pregnant women who cleverly hid their pregnancies were dealt the hardest of blows at the delivery wards as their doctors and midwives injected poison into the baby's skulls to terminate them. Some doctors also induced forced labor to strangle babies to death. In China at the time, a woman's greatest fear was getting pregnant. There was also a penalty, a social maintenance fee of about $500 paid by families who violated the policy. What's worse, even after these payments, their babies were still not documented, which meant they could not go to school or apply for a job. The immediate effect of this evil scheme was that China's population began to fall, but there were long-term consequences. The rate of childbirth dropped and China's population skewed towards males as most families preferred males to further the family line. As a result, millions of infant baby girls were aborted. Also, reduced childbirth meant there were more aged people than children and youth, and the Chinese government, at one point, even considered raising retirement age limits from the 60-year and 55-year for men and women respectively. There was intense pressure and high dependency on children born because, as their family's only child, they had to go to school, earn high-paying jobs to cater for the family, as well as look after their aged parents and grandparents. No siblings, aunties, or uncles to share the burden with. The scheme produced hundreds of thousands of undocumented children, and tens of thousands of these children, especially girls, were adopted by families in the USA, with the remaining ones abandoned in orphanages and on streets. This was even the story of those families in urban centers and rural areas. It was a total mess. In 2005, the Chinese government realized their error in judgment, and so they relaxed the policy to allow families to now produce a maximum of 2 babies. They didn't get any real results with that as families bemoaned the unavailability of childcare for new babies. Mothers feared that having more babies would stall their careers. At that point, citizens had completely lost faith in the Chinese government. As a result, the one-child policy was entirely scrapped in 2016. China now permitted families to have as many children as they desired, but this move was a little too late. After chastising people for producing children, you cannot now force them to give birth. Just as they say, you can force the horse to the riverside, but you can't force it to drink. The year is 2017, and the one-child policy is now a thing of the past, but its impact can still be felt in China. China is in dire need of people, active labor force to serve in their industries and other sectors of their economy like education, agriculture, healthcare, and energy. They can't succeed in this regard with an aging and aged population, but they're too stubborn to review their immigration policies. China is very careful about foreign influence and interference, so immigration is serious business. Now that you have failed woefully in your attempts to encourage more births, so what do? You now introduce the New Generation Artificial Intelligence Plan, a new mission to build and introduce humanoid robots into Chinese societies and factories. These robots were going to be powered by AI that would enhance their capability to showcase intricate human facial expressions like lifelike movements and even be able to hold conversations. These robots were literally going to mimic human beings, and what's more, they were going to be even more efficient because when programmed for work, work is all they're going to do. No chit-chats, no complaints whatsoever. With China, something's always up. The Chinese government's new master plan to use robots to fill gaps in its shrinking labor force was fast-tracked in 2021.
The idea of robots in the service industry becoming a reality, especially in China, where companies have been making great strides in innovation.
The government pumped $733 million into its robotics industry in the first half of 2021. The industry's output corresponded with an astounding 366,000 units reach. This was impressive, but an overly ambitious government wanted more. They wanted all capable hands and smart minds in China on board. So this is what happened. All public and private companies were consulted and incentivized to build even more powerful humanoid robots for the government. Pre-existing tech companies like Alibaba, Huawei, Foxconn, Medea, and Data Robotics are prime examples of such companies now doing the government's bidding. They've been given unlimited power and budget for these operations. Some other companies who originally did not venture into production of robots have since been redirected to focus their efforts into producing extremely resourceful humanoid robots in the past year. Fourier Intelligence is one of such companies. For these companies, robotics was the new cash cow, so why not tap into it? Given the gruesome nature of the one-child policy, families now became reluctant to release their sons to join the People's Liberation Army. They only had one child. They were not going to allow him to die on the battlefield, for that would spell the end of their family line. Even if they allowed them, it was only for the mandatory shorter terms. By 2006, more than half of children from the one-child policy filled the PLA. These new recruits served only shorter terms as they left the army early to seek better employment to take care of their families. As a result, the PLA was constantly recruiting new members, casting serious doubts over their readiness in the event of a war. This weakened the PLA. Now, in order to reinstate its position as the global powerhouse, China needs a strong standing army. The PLA is in dire need of a boost. Don't forget that reduced activities in factories and industries as a result of labor shortages adversely affects military operations. Who's going to build them weapons? Who's going to cook and clean for them? For the Chinese government, the answer is simple. Robots. Robots weren't only going to provide China's army with the numbers, but also assist in disaster relief, provide medical aid, detect cyber threats, and even secure borders. These specialized humanoid military robots were going to be equipped with cameras and sensors for surveillance and reconnaissance purposes as well. Chinese robotics companies are working around the clock to build these robots to have a mind of their own. A human mind that would see them manning weapons and hitting targets with remarkable precision. Oh, China is not joking at all. In fact, presently, Chinese robots man the China-India borders at Tibet. China's at the verge of war. A potential war with the USA is brewing over a territorial claim of Taiwan. This is just like the Russia-Ukraine war annex. In fact, both Chinese and US officials have been warming up to it. The security executive of Norinco, China's third largest defense company, Zheng Yi, in a speech in 2018, foretold of China's grand plan to use AI-powered robots in future wars with the USA. From the US military camp, 4-star general and head of Air Force's Air Mobility, Mike Minihan, has recently predicted that a war with China is more probable than possible in 2025. Also from the US, Director of the Trans-Pacific Program of the German Marshall Fund, Bonnie Glasser, remarked that the prospects for war with China were growing, and that she feared China's remarkable military advancements. Wars are very expensive. To provide a bit of context, just over the last year, the USA has sent over nearly $50 billion in security aid to Ukraine. As a country preparing for war, you definitely need allies, but you also need a vast budget to maintain an active army. Recruiting a soldier costs $15,000, and the cost of treating an injured soldier is about $2 million a year. Well, China can't afford these expenses compared to the USA. Plus, between the two countries, the USA is highly endowed in military artillery and nuclear weaponry. What's worse for China? Remember China's PLA numbers are dwindling? The introduction of a robotic army is, however, a game changer. It significantly tilts the odds into China's favor. China is already the world's largest market for industrial robots, accounting for more than a third of global sales, and they would be fools to not divert production focus and capitalize on that. In response, all the various sectors of the PLA have resumed work. The ground force is developing robots for the military. The Navy is working on autonomous submarines, and the Air Force are also making drones capable of thinking. AI spaceships and AI submarines are also being made. Already built and in use are the Sharkclaw and Mule 200. These two robotic weapons man the China-India borders at Tibet. The Sharkclaws are equipped with cameras and machine guns and can be fired at distance with remote control. The Mule 200's task is transporting military supplies. The PLA and government want weapons with minds of their own by 2025. In August this year, China hosted the World Robots Conference, and it was a sight. There were several robots on display, and they did not fail to impress spectators with their conversation holding skills. Some robots even prepared and served Chinese tea all on their own without human assistance. Their ability to perform basic human tasks is already in the bag, and this is just the prototype stage. GR1 humanoid robot from Fourier Intelligence was an example of robots on display at the conference. It weighed 55 kilos and stood tall at a height of 1.6 meters. It could carry a 50-kilo load. GR1 walked on 2 feet and was capable of carrying patients from bed to wheelchairs. It was going to be very handy in Chinese homes. X20, a quadrupedal robot, was also showcased. It was developed to do dangerous tasks like gas detection. These robots are primed to replace humans in all the physical and repetitive work of construction and manufacturing in the long run. Humans, on the other hand, would be forced into more creative and innovative work. 3D chess by the Chinese government. Operation Build Humanoid Robots. An engineering masterclass the Chinese government calls this one, but this whole operation has rather been a breeding hub of corruption and waste of national resources. It's still in the prototype stage, which means more room for trial and error, and so manufacturing companies spend deep into the government's budget producing not good enough to nothing robots. Even companies with limited to no real knowledge in robotics have joined the fray to also enjoy a piece of the national cake. There are others who also fear the Chinese government has been misled into this obsession with humanoid robots at the detriment of its limited human labor force. You can't force everyone into the digital world of IT and AI. Well, save your opinions because the Chinese government already thinks it can. According to the Chinese government and robot manufacturers, the introduction of humanoid robots into Chinese societies is going to be a swift one because the robots are powered by a common AI mind cloud. What this means is that robots are going to adapt really fast in their new environments because whatever one robot learned from humans, all other robots were primed to benefit. This already poses a problem because humans, as we all know, are complicated and complex characters. Well, given the failures of a radical initiative like the one-child policy, one would think the Chinese government would take a step back and take much-needed time before embarking on another grand plan. But no. This is not how the Chinese government rolls. For them, if one grand plan fails, another grand plan may suffice. Are they right? And if they were, how safe were the people of China and the rest of the world amidst all these new developments?